So good morning and welcome to our very special session, our breakfast with Mike. And Larry brought breakfast for everybody, so we should be good to go. I appreciate your role playing this with me, Larry. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The reason we're doing this is simple. Change is coming. Whether we like it or not, change is coming. There's no doubt about it. It's an absolute. Last I heard, the date is August 17th, and we are all going to have to make some adjustments. And how we adjust is really going to be up to you. What I want to be able to do today is to go through a couple of scenarios where sellers might say, I don't want to pay the buyer broker fee anymore. Or a buyer might say to you, I don't want to pay the fee. That's, I've been told it's free. Well, I got news for you. It's never been free. Buyer brokerage has been around for more than 30 years. It's not free. Never was free. The agents that claimed it was free were misinforming people. But we're going to cover this so that you have some things that you can say if they say, what do you say when they say? And that's what we're going to do. So before we begin this, I just want to kind of set the stage. Well, the first thing we're going to do is pretend we're at a listing appointment, and we're getting to that point where we've agreed on everything and we're filling out the listing contract. Because I think that where this is going to come up most often is going to be while we're filling out the listing contract. Used to be, well, geez, I can go back to used to be, there was never anything about the buyer broker fee in the listing contract. That's the way it was when I first got started with buyer brokerage back in the early 90s. That, of course, changed over time, where listing companies had to share with their sellers how much they were going to offer as a buyer broker fee. Okay. I want to give you an example before we get into this. If you hired me to sell your car and you said, I want to get X amount for my car. And I said, okay, I'll take X percent, whatever it is. And you agreed, you'll pay me X percent if I sell your car. Do you really care if I find somebody else, if I pay somebody else to find the buyer for your car and I negotiate it all for you? Chances are you don't care as long as you get the net you want. The fact that the government is stepping into this right now, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's way above my pay grade, so I can't get into that. How they can turn around and tell a seller what a seller can do with their own property is beyond me. But it's what's in the rules now, and it's what we're going to have to go by, just like some of the other things that we keep getting stuff thrown at us. This is something we're going to have to adapt to. And the producers will adapt. And the non-producers or low producers will whine about it and cry about it and yell about it and scream about it. And a lot of them will get out of the business. And that's unfortunate. Okay? It really is unfortunate, because we need good people. We need people who can be honest with our clients. And instead of complaining about it, maybe we need to learn how to adjust to it and make it work for everybody. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do for you today. Okay? There are a couple of options. Number one, and I've already heard one company that's doing this right now. The one option is for you to become a listing company that simply charges whatever it is you're going to collect as a listing company and offer nothing as a buyer broker fee or nothing as a co-broke fee, which you can do. And by the way, you've always been able to do that. Oh, no, you're mistaken, Mike. We always had to offer something with MLS. Yeah, you could have had to offer $1. So let's not get into how much you did or didn't have to offer. That was an MLS regulation. What if you didn't use MLS? Are you still bound by that regulation if you don't use it? Probably not. So let's not kind of go into that part of it. Let's stick with what we know. And what we know right now is come August 17th, magically, all of those buyer broker fees and co-broke fees are going to be eliminated from the MLS forms, which means our buyer agents are no longer going to be able to see that on the form, what they're getting paid. They shouldn't need to, just so you know, because buyer brokerage has been around for more than 30 years. Let's get with the program, folks. There's a reason for that. You should have a buyer broker agreement with every buyer you work without exception. Now, I know a lot of you don't do that. And I know some of you do it some of the time, but not all of the time. I don't know. Maybe I was slow. Once I learned how to sign a buyer broker agreement, I did it with everybody without exception. And if I've got a buyer broker agreement, I don't need to know what you're offering. What you're offering is going to play a role, but I don't need to know what it is. I just need to know what my buyer is going to pay me. That's it. Okay. So that's one way of looking at this. You're going to have some companies that are going to offer nothing and expect you to get paid by your buyer. Okay. And that's going to happen. There's no question that that's going to happen. There are going to be companies that are going to do it. My understanding is there's already one large company that is making that change. I don't know if they've made it immediately or starting the beginning of the month or whatever, but they're already doing it. I think a lot of, let's just call them medium-sized producing companies, are also going to do something like this because it's going to give them, in their mind, a competitive edge to get more listings. They're going to think that if they offer less, if they agree to take less as a fee, that the sellers are going to be more inclined to list with them. Well, time remains to be seen whether or not that will work or it won't work. But today isn't about that. Today is about what should you say or what could you say? And that's what Larry and I are going to go through right now. So let's just pretend we're sitting with the listing contract, and Larry, we're about to get to that point about commission. Please understand that for today's recording, all commissions are negotiable. I know you know this. So no numbers are locked in stone. I'm going to use some made up numbers, and Larry and I are going to go from there. So Larry, so the next part we're going to talk about on the contract is my commission. And as you can see here, my commission is X%. And of that X%, we're going to offer Y to a buyer broker that might bring us somebody that's willing to pay what you're asking. Any questions
Hold
about
on.
that?
Yeah, I do have a question about that, Mike. I just recently saw in all the headlines about real estate that we no longer have to give a commission to the buyer's agent. And so that was what I was kind of excited about, is the fact that I'm going to get that extra money to stay in my pocket. So I don't want to give anything to the buyer side. It's my understanding they have to get that from their client.
Okay. So first of all,
Como 3 veces.
First of all, let's talk about why you feel this way. I've got a pretty good idea, but can you give me a little bit of what do you feel is the advantage for you not paying a buyer broker fee?
Well, the biggest advantage is, keeping that extra money in my pocket.
Okay, so that would make sense if that money was actually going to go in your pocket. That would make sense. Okay, anything else?
Well, no, not really. But I mean, where else would it go if it's not going to go in my pocket?
Oh, I'll demonstrate that. Don't worry. Let me start by asking this question. Were you aware that the appraised values, in other words, the numbers that everybody uses, including Zillow, I know you told me that's where you came up with your number originally, all those Zillow numbers of past sales include a buyer broker fee? Did you know that?
I guess I hadn't really thought about that. I just saw that, they sold for X and I should be able to sell for that.
Exactly. Okay. So here's what an appraiser is going to do, just like any other closing cost. Okay. If you're not offering that as a closing cost, and the comparables that you're using to establish your value did include it, then they'll subtract that from yours.
That's how it works?
Yeah. Yeah, if for example, one house sold for $200,000 and the other one sold for 205, but had a $10,000 credit for a new roof or something like that, then they'd make that adjustment so that the two equal out.
Oh, yeah, I knew that. I knew they made adjustments for like new roof, new HVAC system or something like that, but commissions?
Yeah, it's a closing cost. It's the same thing. So realistically, and I'll give you a thought on this, if we were going to only use comparable sales that did not pay a buyer broker fee, we might use the sales of the sale by owners, people who sell on their own that don't pay a fee. Now, if we were going to use those comparables for your house, according to the latest NAR statistics, I believe the number is $28,000. The average sale by owner sells for $28,000 less than the average sale with a realtor. So if we subtract the 28,000 off of yours, we could probably get away with not offering a buyer broker fee.
I don't want to reduce my price down 28,000.
Didn't think you would. Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit and get to the whole crux of the matter. Is it more important to you for you not to pay a buyer broker fee, or is it more important to you to net the amount of money you need to net in order to move on?
Well, like I said, the couple neighbors down the road had this identical house to ours and they sold for 400. I'm not looking for more than that. I feel 400 is a fair price. So if I can get 400,000, that's what I'm happy with.
And do you understand that they also did pay a buyer broker fee?
Yeah, I guess because that's before this all went into play, but now they don't have to, or from what I understand, they're not allowed to, actually.
Well, that's not the case. The case is simple. The only thing that's not allowed anymore is we're not allowed to put the buyer broker fee in MLS. That's it. There's nothing that says we can't offer some kind of closing cost adjustment that the buyer could put toward commission. Okay, there's nothing that stops that. As a matter of fact, I think it would be in your best interest to do that. Could I explain to what I mean?
Sure.
Well, if I sell your house, and by the way, you're going to run into companies that are going to be okay with doing it just the way you want. But if I sell your house, and that's what we're looking at, by myself, okay, I can tell you over the past 5 years, I've actually sold the house myself less than 10% of the time.
Okay.
90% of the time, I've used another agent to help get the house sold. So if we're going to take that advantage away from you and say, okay, you're not going to pay a buyer broker fee, which means I've got to sell it myself, we got a 90% chance of failure going into this. Is that what you're looking for?
No, I didn't think about that.
See, I can get the home sold. Here,
But
let me explain it to you in a way that maybe you understand. What is it you do for a living?
I'm electrical contractor.
Okay. So if your boss came up to you on Monday and said, Larry, I want you to keep working this week, but we're not going to pay you anymore. How long would you keep working for that guy?
He's not going to pay me for the week's worth of work.
Yeah.
I'm calling out sick the next week.
Okay. You see, but that's exactly what you're trying to do with the buyer broker. You're trying to say, we want you to keep working. We want you to keep selling the homes, but we don't want to pay you anymore.
Yeah, but I understand that they're going to get it from their buyer's agent now. Or I'm sorry, from their buyers. So,
Yeah.
they're still going to get paid.
Oh, I think they're going to get paid by their buyer. Absolutely. Okay. But in a lot of cases, they're not going to have all the extra money in order to do it outside of closing. They're going to need to finance it. And that's what they're doing by making you the offer that they do and then finance it so that you're still going to net what you want and they're going to be able to pay their buyer broker out of the proceeds of the sale. Now, listen, if you're not going to net what you want, Larry, say no. I have no problem with that. But if you net what you want, what does it matter?
Well, I was just thinking, yeah, I know I said I want 400 because that's what my neighbor sold for. But if they paid a commission of 3% to the buyer broker, and I'm not gonna pay that, then that math adds up to 412 for me. So I'm like, wow, okay, so now I can get 412 for my property.
Actually, it goes to 388.
I don't know what
They
you mean.
got 400 and they paid the buyer broker fee. That brings it down to 388. They didn't get 400, Larry.
Okay, all
They got
right,
388.
okay, I see that. So then if I sell it for 4 and don't pay the buyer broker, then I made my 12,000 there.
And if you want to do that using a 90% failure rate, we could do that. But I think it would be in your best interest. Here's the way I would look at this. Just like you wouldn't go to work if they stop paying you, buyer broker's not going to go to work for you if they're not going to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. But I still, you know, I'd like to at least maybe start off not offering anything towards their commission and let them get it from their buyers if they can.
I guess we're not communicating, Larry. They're getting it from their buyer. They're just financing it as part of the transaction. That's all it is. They're still getting it. They're still getting it from their buyer. They're signing a buyer broker agreement that says they're going to get X amount of dollars. Okay. They're just financing it as part of the transaction. You're still getting what the same thing as your neighbor got, which is what you said you wanted to get.
Right.
See, I can get the house sold, Larry, but if I got everybody in the area trying not to show it because nobody's going to pay them, it's just going to take a lot longer. And you did tell me you wanted to get out of here by the end of October.
Yeah, it sounds like the same scenario when we sold our last house and we were for sale by owner for like ages and then finally listed it. But
Yeah, I can get it sold, Larry. But if you're going to handcuff me on the tools I can use, not sure it's going to be in your best interest.
well, okay, it makes sense. It does make sense, but I have one question. I hope you don't get offended by this. But you said that 90% of the time it's another agent that sells the property, 10% of the time you're the person that sells it. So no offense, but should I interview more people that seem to have a better track record of selling houses? Like, if you only can get your listing sold 10% of the time, shouldn't I be looking for one of those other agents that do it 90%?
That's a great question. You see, the thing is, the 90% are buyer agents. They negotiate really well for buyers. They're not so good with sellers. You're not hiring me. Let me put this in a way that maybe you can understand. You're not hiring me to sell the house. You're hiring me to get it sold. And there's a difference between those two things. What I'm really good at is putting a deal together with these buyer agents and negotiating it so that you net the most amount of money. That's what you're hiring me for.
I see the difference.
Did you take were you able to glance through any of that pre-listing information I sent to you?
Did I look at it?
Did you see how many comments there were from those sellers about how I negotiated for them?
Yeah, everybody seemed to be pretty happy with you.
I think you will be too. Why don't we just get the ball rolling now?
All right, as long as I don't lose any money, I want to get that 400,000.
You will be in charge of accepting or rejecting any offers that come in. No exceptions. Fair
Okay.
enough?
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So that's going to be the way I would handle things right now moving forward. Is it going to work every time? Nope, nothing ever does. Okay. I'm going to come back and open this up for questions, but before I do that, I want to do the buyer side, because we're going to have buyers that are going to say, I've been able to do this for free. I've bought 4 homes before. I've never had to pay the buyer agent, blah, 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 blah. So you want to ask a
I
question?
just wanted to let everybody know, we didn't rehearse this at all. As a matter of fact, I was a little bit nervous of role playing with you because I was hoping that I would have the right things, know what to say, but I wanted to throw you that curveball about why shouldn't I list with an agent that sells 90% of the time? I wanted to see how you'd handle that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. You can throw stuff at me anytime you want, all right, so let's pretend we're sitting now with a buyer. We've gone through all the questions about why they're moving, when they need to move by, all that stuff. They're willing to talk to my mortgage people, and I'm going to say to them, well, Larry, I think that matter of fact, no, I don't think. I know I can find the house for you that you're looking for, and I'm willing to put that in writing. I'm willing to put my promises in writing. I've got this form here that we use that basically is going to set those promises out. And then I would start the beginning of it, and we'd get to that point about commission. So in order for me to go to work for you, I get paid X%. Any questions about that?
No, we bought houses before, but that you get paid that from the seller side, right?
Well, that depends. Some sellers do, some don't. Some pay all of it, some pay part of it. The way things are going these days, I'm sure there are going to be some sellers we're going to run into that are going to say they're not going to pay any part of it. And if that's the case, then you are responsible for the X%.
Wow, what's the X%? How much?
Well, it's X% of
Oh,
the transaction.
do you have any negotiation? You have room to, negotiate on that?
Oh, I can go higher if you want.
No, I don't want to go higher.
Yeah, I didn't think you would. Let me explain something to you, Larry, that might help you, okay? Buyer brokerage been around for more than 30 years. People have been paying an agent for more than 30 years to help them negotiate on the purchase of their home. The only thing that's different with me, and maybe you haven't done this in the past, but the only thing that's different with me is I'm telling you up front that this is what the fee is. It's always been there. Okay? But I'm telling you up front what it is. Because with some of these changes, we're likely to run into some sellers who are going to say, I'm not going to pay it no matter what. And when that happens, we have an option. We can walk away from it, or we can try to negotiate it as part of the transaction. And that's what I do most of the time, is we'll make an offer and we'll ask for closing cost adjustments to come back to the buyer from the seller. And out of those proceeds, you'll end up paying my fee.
But if we're gonna ask them for closing costs, aren't we gonna have to pay more for their house? Because they're asking me 400,000 for that house we like, but if we're gonna ask them for, closing costs to be paid, aren't they gonna, I mean, in this market, it's a seller's market, I hear, so aren't we gonna be competing?
And that could be difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say to you it's going to be easy, because it may not be easy, okay? But that's what you hire a guy like me for, because it's what I specialize in. I specialize in being able to put those things together for you so that the mortgage company is going to tell us what you can afford. We've already talked about that.
Right.
I'm surely not going to put you into a position where you're going to be offering more than you can afford. So that's not going to happen. And is it going to limit us with some sellers that are not willing to pay it? Yeah, but it's limiting them as well, because quite honestly, if they're not agreeing to pay something, anything, I don't know what it's going to be, but they're probably going to hurt themselves in the long run. that could happen, but it would also happen more so with people who don't really need to sell. Maybe they want to sell, but they don't need to sell. If we find somebody who needs to sell, they're going to listen to us because we're going to make a good offer. We've already talked about that. So ideally, what's happening here is instead of you paying me the X% out of pocket, which you could do, but instead of that, we're basically financing it over 30 years. We're putting it into the mortgage is what we're doing. No different than any other closing cost that you might have. You turn around and say, listen, I want them to replace the roof. So I want a closing cost adjustment to replace the roof. Basically, what you're doing is you're financing the roof costs over 30 years. It's not going, your net's not going to change. The amount that you're going to pay is not going to change. That's what you hire me for.
Is it possible that, we can, get part of the money from them and, so I don't have to, finance the whole amount for your commission?
I'm going to ask for it. Absolutely. Yes. Doesn't mean they're going to give it, but I'm going to ask for it.
I hadn't thought about the fact that I could finance it. I see what you're saying, pay a little bit more for the house as the concession, but that's gonna raise my mortgage payment, right?
It might raise it by $5 or $6 a month.
That's all? It doesn't raise that much?
Well, I mean, if you think about whatever it's going to be, X% over 30 years, it's probably less than that.
My wife spends that much at Starbucks.
Yeah. It's tough to drive by those places without stopping in, getting a cup of coffee. And I notice you do like yours.
I make my own though. I can't afford that Starbucks coffee.
Listen, no matter what's going to happen here, nothing's going to go to closing unless you are agreeable to the numbers. The question here becomes, do you want to hire somebody who's trying to hide the money, or you want to hire somebody who's telling you upfront, this is what it's going to be, but I will get it negotiated for you. And if I don't, just say no.
Well, I don't want to upset you or offend you at all, but what is stopping me from just going to the agent that has the listing and dealing directly with him? You're a really nice guy and stuff, but what stopped me from doing that? And then I don't have to pay, a commission.
That's a great question. There are going to be some agents in this new, with all these new changes that are going to be willing to work for less money. Okay. And they're going to do it right up front. Right up front, they're going to say, don't worry about it. Buyer comes to me, I'll take care of it. I'd be concerned though, because if somebody's willing to give away their own money that quickly, is that really the person you want protecting yours?
No,
I didn't think so.
I guess not.
In every change there's been in the industry, there's always going to be some cycles. And one of the cycles is going to be a lot of people are going to get out of the business. And they're going to get out of the business because they don't really want to be transparent with the buyers and sellers the way I am. This is what I do for a living, Larry. I've been doing this for a long time. And there's no possible way that I would put you in a position where you could lose money. I just wouldn't do that. If you've looked at any of the reviews about me, you already know that.
No, I like what I hear, and you definitely seem very honest and very knowledgeable. So, okay, yeah, I'm comfortable.
Okay. Well, then
Be
let's
more comfortable if you could cut X down to a number slightly lower, but
Yeah, I don't blame you. I would too. But if I was willing to give my money away that quickly, how good am I going to be to negotiate yours?
okay. Okay, I see your point.
Yeah. The truth is, it's still going to come down to the net numbers. And that's always going to be in your control, not mine. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's get this thing rolling.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm going to leave this recording on because I'll bet you some of you thought of something you might have tried to say while we were doing our little thing there. Thank you very much, Larry, for helping out.
Yep.
So if you want to come off of mute, don't all do it at once, but if you have a question, let's get started with some questions. Oh, I had a couple of comments here. Let's see what the, oh, yeah, that's true, John. No question about that. Yeah, it's not going to do that. Okay. John says this new stuff's going to make it more expensive for the buyer down the road. It's not going to work. It really is not going to make it any more expensive than it has been right along. What people are not understanding is all of the comparables, everything you look at has already included these fees. And what they're hoping is that it's going to drive the fees down. And what they're going to learn is that top producers are not going to give their money away quite so easily. Will there be some agents that will start working for less? Sure, there will. Just like there are agents out there right now that will cut their commission to work to get a listing or cut their commission to work a buyer. There will always be the discount people out there. Always. They've existed for more than 30 years, and I can't go back any more than that because that's as far as I go. But they've existed. I've always had to deal with discount agents. I can't tell you how many times I went on listing appointments where somebody would say, well, could you do it for this or could you do it for that? So-and-so said they would, and I just kind of have to overcome that. That's always going to be out there. Okay? But what we need to do is be prepared to handle it. If you don't feel you're worth the money, why should they? Something to think about. If you don't feel you're worth the money, why should they? So you have to believe you're worth it, and then you've got to prove you're worth it. So who's got a question for me? I'm looking forward to this. Here we go, Sherry. I'm ready. Come on, bring it. She's still on mute. She's wondering. She's got that. Do I push
Okay.
the?
All right. Yeah. My phone was going crazy. All right. Here's my question. When you brought up, because I took notes, when you brought up, when Larry said he was an electrician and you said, would you go to work for free? I mean, is that you saying that in a roundabout way, saying if you don't offer the buyer compensation to the agents, that they're not going to show your property?
Oh, I couldn't say that. Not legally.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, are we allowed to allude to that? Because that's sort of like an ethics thing.
Yeah, here's what I think on that, okay? We can be honest and say, listen, I have no idea. I know legally agents are not supposed to look at that fee. Okay? I know that. But let me just ask you straight out. If it was you, if you were the agent and you saw that nothing was being offered, I mean, be honest with me. Would you show the house? We can look at all the ethics and all the other stuff, and I get it. But the reality is, if agents find out they're not going to get paid, they're not going to show those homes. Now, they'll find any other reason to, I mean, they won't say that's why, but they won't show those homes.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But
Right.
I'm just saying, how do you get around saying that without saying it?
Just the way I did. Larry, would you go to work if you weren't getting paid?
I can just say that I know there's a lot of realtors that go through the MLS and they put the houses they're going to show in order of what their compensation was going to be. I'm not saying I'm one of those guys, but a lot of agents that probably do that.
And that's part of the reason why we're in this fix, is because agents do that. And here's the thing, and I guess maybe I'm not communicating this. Buyer brokerage has been around for more than 30 years. If we were using it the way we should have 30 years ago, we wouldn't be in this spot. Unfortunately, the majority of the agents have not used the buyer broker agreements. They just show homes without it.
It's our responsibility to make sure that our clients realize it's not in their best interest for the listing to not offer some sort of compensation. Just it's not in their best interest. You know, they're gonna receive less money for their homes.
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna use an example, but I'm not gonna mention any names, okay? So you'll have to figure this all out. But I personally know agents that would not use a buyer broker fee, a broker agreement for years. I couldn't get them to use them. Now they won't go without it. But think about it. I hounded people to use it. How many of your brokers hound you to use a buyer broker agreement with every buyer? Sham and I go back more than 30 years. And Sham, when we first started with this, right? You remember
Yep.
how many times that would come up?
No, not many times. Because optional, people thought it was optional, even though in Ohio it was a law.
Yeah. By the way, it's been a national law
Right.
for more than 30 years for them to sign that consumer, whatever they call it now. They've changed the name 4 or 5 times.
Consumer guide, yeah.
Right. And that form basically said to the buyer what your relationship was with them.
Exactly.
How many people use that? Not many. I've been into companies and done seminars. I've asked the question, how many of you use a buyer broker fee with all your buyers? Less than 5% of the hands will go up. And we know this is 30 years later. And less than 5% of the hands go up. Oh, I don't have to. The seller's always paid it.
That's why.
Okay.
Well, it goes back to the brokers, how they impose it, because my brokerage has these two forms, essential and necessary, for them to even accept the package as a signed contract.
Oh, brokerage could fix this problem in a heartbeat. All they have to
Yes.
do is say from now on, you will use a buyer broker agreement with every buyer and make it
Right.
company policy,
Or you won't get paid.
or you don't get paid.
Yeah.
Watch how fast they start using them then.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always change. And, you know, back when they put TRID into effect, where you needed 3-day CD sent out before you could settle, everybody's like, oh my God, it's gonna make our business so hard to do. And that's old news now. And we just adapted and moved on. This is a big change to our industry. I understand that, but those of us that have the proper training and stuff like that, it's just a little bump in the road, and then everything 6 months, a year from now, it's going to be common practice with everybody, and it's not going to be a big deal. Just like TRID, just like changing the HUD form to the ALTA form, you know, everything changes, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Well said, Larry. Very well said.
Yeah, one of the
you,
students
Chris.
that I have, speaking of with Chris talking, has a buyer agent working for him, has a couple of them. That agent never has a problem getting their buyer broker signed. You know why?
I know why,
Yeah, because that's how we started with them.
right?
We taught them from the beginning. By the
Yep.
way, everybody on this call was taught when you get a listing, you get a listing contract. Everybody on this call was taught that. So
Yeah.
these days, you don't ever take a listing without a listing contract. But you were not taught, for the most part, that every buyer gets a buyer contract. You were not taught that. And so now this becomes something new. It's not new. It's been around for 30 years. I've had
Can I
students
say
say,
something, Mike?
sure.
I mean, so Mike was when he was talking about the guy who wouldn't use buyer broker agreement, that was me.
What was
I've been
that?
using I'm sorry.
I wasn't gonna tell.
That's fine. I don't mind admitting. I got big shoulders. You know, I've been using it for 5 years now, and me and my team, we're just looking at it as this is business as usual. You
Yep.
know, yes, it's going to change slightly, but that's not our problem. In the past week, I signed 6 buyer broker agreements saying they're going to pay me whatever. You know, and I've been doing that for 5 years now. It was something that Mike took a year to get into my head, and I finally did it after I lost about $25,000 in commissions. You know, and I said enough is enough, and I just started using the buyer broker agreement, and every one of my agreements says you're going to pay me X. I don't care what the other side offers; it doesn't make a difference. You know,
See,
so you gotta stop being afraid of it and thinking it's going to be the end of the industry and the end of the world, and you know, and just start using it. You know, and even if I mean, listen, we got to get paid somehow. You know, unfortunately, if you waited this long to start using it, you haven't had the chance to practice with it. But if you don't make a big deal out of it, they're not going to make a big deal out of it. I can tell you right now. You know, in this year alone, I may have had one person that wouldn't sign the buyer broker agreement, and I was fine with that. I was absolutely fine with that. You know, let them go work for somebody else for free.
you know, you bring up a great point there that most of us simply do not have enough business. And when you only have a limited amount of business, then you're scared about getting these things signed. You're scared you're going to lose them. When you've got enough, you don't worry about it, because if you lose one here or there, then guess what? So what? Move on, next. You
Yep.
know, some will, some won't. So what? Most of you have heard me say that many, 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 many times. Okay.
Yes.
That's one of my, that quote got attributed to me, which was pretty cool. Chris, I remember one of the really high-end deals you did where the amount that the seller was offering was not the same amount that you were supposed to get, and you were nervous about asking them for it, but you did. And afterwards, you were like, they didn't even question it. You remember the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was a $16,000 deal for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember how nervous you were about it?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. John
But
brings
I
up,
got it.
I know you did. Yeah.
You know.
I know John brings up a point. He says, how about those companies like Op City that charge 35% of realtors working with their leads? Yeah. Well, stop doing that.
That's right.
You know, if you stop doing that, you don't need to worry about that. I am not, they may or may not go out of business. Listen, think about this. Telemarketers are still in business years after the do not call list. They're still there. Okay. Don't worry about who's going out of business. Don't worry about anything but you. Start worrying about what your business does. What do you do? What are your standards? My standard was simple. I was not going to work with somebody who wouldn't sign a buyer broker agreement with me. That was it. What's your standard? Was there anything else? Is there anything else that came to mind while Larry and I were role playing either the seller side or the buyer side that you wanted to ask? I have this feeling that some of you have a question. You're just kind of nervous to ask it. Don't be. Just ask.
So I have a question.
Oh, good.
Okay, yeah. So like I know you can't collect more than what your agreement says, whether it be a listing agreement or buyer's broker agreement.
Correct.
So if the buyer broker, I'm sorry, if the seller is offering a concession that is greater than whatever percent or fee that you have on your buyer broker agreement, you can only collect what's on the buyer broker agreement. Okay. My question is, how do you handle, or how do you think we should handle a situation where the buyer doesn't want to pay a buyer broker commission, so they're going to go directly to the agent? Now, if you've got a listing agreement that says it's 3%, which I'm never going to do that, but let's say somebody does, you're going to work both sides of the transaction for half the fee.
Yeah, I think
How do you
that
suggest
we're gonna-
that be handled?
well, first of all, I think that we're going to run into that no matter what. There's always going to be discount brokers out there. You know, there's always going to be people that are going to do that. And if you want to know the actual truth, in my mind, I would walk away from that deal anyway, and try to find some people who need me. Because the people who need you won't question this. They'll pay you.
Agreed.
Somebody that wants to go buy a Porsche doesn't turn around and start saying to the guy, I want to pay a Chevy price. You know, it doesn't work that way. When people
Right.
understand value, they pay it. Are you worth it?
Absolutely.
Then walk away from the deal that isn't. Is that easy to do? No,
No.
never going to be easy to do. And the only way you can do it is if you have, there's that word again, enough. If I have enough other business, makes it easier to walk away from the ones I shouldn't work.
Absolutely.
So if I can comment on Chris's question, if I was the listing agent and my sellers were not offering any commission over to the buyer side, and I had an unrepresented buyer come to me that wanted to purchase the house or put an offer in, you know, I would go back to my sellers and I would just simply tell them, say, listen, we have a buyer that's unrepresented. They're going to make an offer. I have no idea who, you know, they're going to use for their mortgage company. You know, do they know how to order title? Do they know, you know, how to schedule a home inspection? How do you want to handle that? Because I represent you, I don't represent them. If you decide you want to go under contract with them, just know it's very risky because they have nobody representing them. Now, if you want, I can represent them, but I can't do that for free. And that's when you negotiate, you know, a higher commission with them. Can we do it that way? Can we say, well, I'm a 3% as a listing agent, but if this buyer comes over unrepresented, you're gonna have to give me another 1.5% to handle that.
Yeah, I think eventually you'll get caught in a windmill on that, and they'll put a stop to it. It's just my opinion, but I
Why
think
do you think that's not gonna be allowed?
yeah, I'm thinking that the reason that that's not going to be allowed is then other companies would just start doing whatever it is, 3, 4, whatever it is, and let the word out that, hey, if you're a buyer and you come to me, I can still negotiate. Oh, but what about all these other agents? You won't negotiate for them. Just so I don't think that they'll let that go through like that. In the beginning, it will, because nobody will be the wiser. Guys, you have to realize, guys and gals, you have to realize we are going to be up against a lot of discount brokers. There are going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be discount brokers. There are going to be companies out there that are going to advertise. We'll do both sides for 3 or 4 or 2, whatever. There are going to be companies that are going to do that. We have been up against this our whole careers.
Yep.
It's always been there. The wording is going to be different right now, but we've always been up against this. Larry, you've been doing this almost as long as I have. Do you ever remember a time when there were not discount brokers?
No, it's always been around.
Sham, you've been doing this long as I have. Do you ever remember a time when there were not discount brokers?
No, sir. They come and go.
Yes.
They don't stick long enough.
Yes. They hang around long enough to try to, to be a leech on the business, and then they leave when they start losing.
Yep.
You want to survive? You need to learn how to handle this and do it confidently. So, boy, I never thought this was going to go close to the full hour, and it did. And now you've got a much longer recording. I hope that works for you. I will put this one up. If you have questions that you were like, I don't know, too shy to ask, you can always send me a text, 860-638-9816, or send me an email at mike@mikefiddler.com, and I'll be happy to answer it for you. Or you could go on my website, book 30 minutes, and I'll spend 30 minutes with you one-on-one. There's no charge for that. In the meantime, Larry, thank you for participating. For those of you who asked some questions, I appreciate the input. Always great to see my friend Sham Reddy here. We go back, God, we go back way too far to admit. That's what we do.
That's right.
You guys have a great week. Go get
Thanks, Mike.
signed.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
righty.
Mike.
Great week.
Thanks, Mike.